Hello, everyone. This is Mike Dietrich, and I'm here to give you a small talk about why games can be ideal learning environments, or at least why I think them to have this possibility. So let's maybe start with me. First off, this will be a big overview of lots of scientific or sort of scientific stuff. At least I quoted scientific resources. Well, let's see where we go with this. So, to start off, I am Mike. My first language is German. Then the second best language of mine is English. And I learned some French in school, but do not put me to I can't really use it anymore. Only can read it. And I learned some Japanese. But they're just out of interest. I'm mostly a musician, playing lots of instruments. You can see them here. And also a cultural scientist with a focus on music and games. I'm also a lifelong gamer, have always been a gamer, playing lots of games. You can see them here, like RuneScape, World of Warcraft, Harvest Moon, Dark Souls, Gothic 3, lots of great games. And recently I'm also an entrepreneur and building a game-based application to learn languages on Cardano. And this meme here is basically me, because I think I'm sort of a pathological procrastinator. So whenever there are important tasks that need to be finished or high expectations of people and life, and I try to fulfill them, and then suddenly, the new task pops up, and So one of the examples is my attempt to learn Japanese on Duolingo. Duolingo, you might probably all know this, is a gamified language learning platform. And when COVID hit in March 2020, I said to myself, well, let's put the time to good use. And 2 months I was doing great. I was just going hiragana and then katakana and learning all the time. But then I just missed out one single day of not having a streak, and it just resulted in a total loss of all my motivation. Duolingo actually fostered an all or nothing mentality in my head when I wanted to learn this. And the Duolingo is using competition as a tool. So they have leaderboards and scores. They have sort of useless rewards, like these lingots. You cannot really do anything with them that is fun. You can block yourself from losing your streak, but I don't think that the focus of learning something should be to just have a streak and nothing else. Also, it was not really engaging towards me, and it was just lots of recall of facts. And all in all, it was not a game. And that's the big problem, in my opinion, that it's just gamified. It's not a game. But they get some extra points, of course, for their new and free stories that I just checked out a couple of days ago. They are really cool. So you have little stories that you can answer. Yeah. So one of the resource that I want to bring up here is written by Professor Nicola Witten in the year 2014, and it's named Digital Games and Learning Research and Theory. And she really tries to make a broad overview of all the scientific stuff that you could engage with if you want to do something with games and learning. And she looks at it from an interdisciplinary perspective, because you have some research that is only looking at the game side, but not at the learning side, and the other way around as well. But you need these, but you also need psychology and other fields that I will not mention. So I think it's really important to look at this topic in a broader perspective and not just nail down on one subject. So a game. What is a game? A game is first a challenging activity. and that requires a player normally. So the second thing is it's structured through rules and goals, and you can progress in these and get rewards. These rewards can be of any kind. It's separate from the real world. That goes back to Huizinga with his magic circle. But I'm not so sure if gaming is really separate from the real world, or if this is if this is more a static view of reality, and my view of reality is a bit more dynamic, to say. And I just say it's a different mode of perception. The fourth point is a game is undertaken with a spirit of play. That means basically that you are free to do what you want to do, but you have limits. And the rules, they give you these limits most of the time, and you choose to participate in a game. The moment someone forces you to play a game, it ceases to be in a game for you, of course. And fifth point, it's often played with or against other people. So it's deeply social. You might even say it's inherently social, because to my knowledge, the first single-player games really came up with the digital gaming movement. And before that, you basically need at least another player for each game. You need basically two players that maybe not the play of a child. Maybe you can just turn around in a circle and you could call this a game. But but most games are really deeply social. And games, they really have a high potential for engagement with high-level learning outcomes, or at least most likely. These high-level learning outcomes are some like creativity, synthesis, teamwork, evaluation, critical thinking, or problem solving. But this is not easily evaluated for robust evidence, because it's quite hard to do so. I'll touch on that later. Digital games, they often work with, you have one mechanic or some mechanics. You need to learn these mechanics, and through learning these mechanics, you master the game. So that means games, or at least digital games, are designed to learn. I found this quite astonishing when thinking about games like this. But yeah, if you think about it, Super Mario, Dark Souls, Zelda, whatever you play, you always start at an easy start, and then you progress, and it gets harder and harder and harder. And Dark Souls brings this to a climax, of course. Anyone that has played the Dark Souls has seen this screen too many times. And the community even made a parody with this and exchanged "you died" with "get good," because Dark Souls, they really put you in a really complex game, and it's super hard. The first enemy can kill you, no problem, if you do not know how to deal with them. So it brings these learning mechanics to a climax. Of course, when you talk about games, you always are talking about flow as well, and that's basically the amount of challenge, and it's the relation to the skill of the player. So normally you start really easy, and then you progress. And you could say that you progress in a straight line, but modern research is more voting for it being rising in plateaus. So you have some difficulty, then you need some relaxation, some more difficulty, and then some relaxation again. And this is the flow channel, you could say. And if you are below your skills, then you are getting bored, because becoming bored because it's not challenging to you. And if it's too hard, you're just getting overwhelmed. So one of the quotes here: and fun from games arises out of mastery. It arises out of comprehension. It is the act of solving puzzles that makes games fun. In other words, learning is the drug. And Yeah, an engaging game is when you get absorbed into the gameplay, and that you get mostly when you have the right balance between the amount of information to stimulate curiosity while not producing sensory or cognitive overload. Not like all my slides here, because they are probably a bit overloading. To the next one. When we talk about games, we always need to distinguish them from work or education, because if you think about a game, you often think about a waste of time. So it's only fun and enjoyable, but it's not really useful, and maybe it's only for children, but for sure it's a waste of time. I say this is absolutely no bullshit, and I say that and work is often portrayed as useful, productive, serious, meaningful, and the resource for a fulfilled life. Yeah, I just think that this comes down to your perspective, and probably it's just, I think the term of game probably needs to get a bit more modern in the heads of people. So there are different kinds of, when you talk about games and learning, different kinds of categories that you could think about. One of them, the most obvious one, is gamification. Everybody has probably heard about this. But gamification is you just take some game elements and apply them to a non-related task. So the game is more a tool and that sweetens undesired things. And often there is a curriculum or an agenda that you want to get there. And the design process starts with the subject most of the times, and not with the game. The game is just a tool. And when you talk about gamification, it's mostly only points, badges, and leaderboards. So when you look at Duolingo, you always see yourself in comparison to others. You have a leaderboard. When progressing, you get points, and I'm not sure if they even have badges. But if you have some achievements, you're achieving anything, then you get a badge for that, which is also like an assessment or a comparison of what you have learned. Edutainment. This is the big villain, basically, because these were the early learning games, and they are nowadays more regarded as inherently problematic in the context of meaningful learning, because they typically fail to create the same engaging gameplay as commercial games, and they often lack meaningful interactivity. They most often focus on behaviorism, so only extrinsic motivation and little integration of game and learning experience together. And it's mostly simply drill and practice and focus on low-level learning outcomes like memorization and facts. This led to the chocolate-covered broccoli problem. Yesterday, we already had to talk about games and learning, which was quite fun. And yeah, there the chocolate-covered broccoli problem rose up as well. So that's basically, you have the feeling of being tricked, and someone just wants to feed you the broccoli, but they cover it up with chocolate so you do not see it. And naturally, if someone finds out that this is not chocolate, but that there's a broccoli hiding beneath it, they are most likely pretty pissed, because that's not nice to do. And yeah, you're feeling tricked and misled. Serious games take it. Yeah, they say, okay, games not always need to be fun and enjoyable. They can also be serious. And I think in modern days, it's only the serious attempt that is the defining for the development process of serious games. So you need to think about it not in a gamey way, but more but be really serious about all the consequences that your design decisions will have with the users. And it sort of implies that normally games aren't serious, which you could criticize. But what I'm about is game-based learning, or games for learning. And that's also the main thing that Nicola Witten is proposing in her book. Because then you start really with the game design centrally and not just as a tool. So the learning outcome is open, and you do not just want to teach one thing, and it's less hierarchical. So you have more of a community of practice or apprenticeship where you can work yourself up and learn together with others. Yeah. So More text. The next one is 6 areas of digital games that could support learning. One of them is active learning. So an environment that encourages exploration and problem solving and your own agency to inquire and to do stuff. In that you can collaborate, you can practice, you can consolidate skills. Second one is engenders engagement. So you have clear and achievable goals and a large world to explore and control. And through interacting, you face appropriate challenges, and it's just stimulating your curiosity. Appropriateness, also really important, that the students or the people that are playing, they think about it as relevant and acceptable and not just something that the teacher gave to them. It's also good if 6 areas trigger reflection, because the simplest moments can be you died once more in Dark Souls and you need to reflect, okay, how can I do this better? But also they can be meta talks at the end of playing with a class or something. And I quickly want to touch on 8 ways to combine games and learning. So 8 different ways to learn with games. One is with entertainment games. You might notice it's quite complicated, the field, and once you start about learning, you really have to get a bit clearer on what you're talking about. And so the first one is with entertainment games. So you take an old entertainment game and you just use it for learning, or like you take with The Witcher or something and put it on another language and then play it in this language, just called creative gaming. The second is with educational games, which are specifically designed for educational settings. The third one is inspired by games. So, for example, you're playing chess and you're only playing this, and once you play this, you think about, the algorithms behind are very interesting, or you first notice that there is something like an algorithm, and then you're inspired by that. Within games is also possible, which is more the informal learning side, probably. So you have a game and you're learning within that as the content of the game. You can also learn about games, like games as cultural artifacts, or you can learn from games. So you can take the design principles behind a game and apply them to a different learning situation, like you would do in gamification. You can also learn through game creation. So you create your own game or your own level, and you learn through doing this, which is really important, I think. And the last point is within game communities. So you can also learn in the community that participates in the game and plays it in a forum or something. And when you want to evaluate the effectiveness of digital games for learning, you running in some kind of blockers. Like for one of the things in formal situations, whenever a game is played, it's mostly a really small scale intervention and quite insignificant. And when people are researching about games, they are not objective most of the times, but heavily biased towards gamings are effective. Yeah, that's critical. Yeah, and measuring the learning outcomes and their transferability is generally really difficult, and you need just large-scale quantitative experimental plus deep qualitative research to make sure of this. So one of the major things that you can learn through gaming is through problem solving. So you have a challenge, and that is really central to digital games, which stimulates the player's desire to play further. And a challenge is an activity that is difficult to do and requires thought and effort, and therefore provides a feeling of satisfaction when a goal is achieved. It all comes back to problem-based learning, and that's motivated in the need to apply the knowledge and the information. Also, often the internet is quite important because it requires digital literacy. And the core idea is really that there is not one single solution, but a whole range of solutions. And that makes the game or the game student relationship more of a facilitator more than and less of an expert, less hierarchical, and more learning experiences can happen here. But it's not I'm the expert that tells you what you need to learn. Yeah, games provide a meaningful framework for offering problems to students. And a game itself is, you could argue, is a big problem that is composed of smaller, causally linked problems. Types of problems and challenges in digital games. Yeah, one is knowledge-based. That is, basically a quiz, recall of facts. Puzzles are, you also have just one single correct answer, but you, good puzzles, they must be solvable on your own. They have checkpoints for larger puzzles, and they are quite elegant and fit for purpose, according to Snyder and Zillinger. Strategy, it's another type of problems. So you need to plan a series of action and review your actions and then adapt and thinking outside the box, basically. Creative, so you have a meaningful and achievable challenge. I think creating something in a game is possibly one of the most powerful ways to stimulate and motivate learners. And also because the solutions do not need to have been considered by the game designers themselves, but they can just emerge while playing the game. And this also can make the game way more interesting and for a longer time. Physical problems. Yeah, we see with VR that that it's just harder, and most people do not want to be physical when playing. Social games, social problems. It's you have other players, so you need to work with them and negotiate, discuss. And the last is perseverance. Or endurance. So that is basically a prolonged and repeated simple activity, like cookie clicker. I don't know. You click on cookies to get more cookies, and with cookies you can buy a factory to click more cookies. That's the concept of cookie clicker. And lots of people, they refrain from this because it's often used with microtransactions and getting the most bang for your bucks in Farmville. Yeah, but I think it's mostly that people just love making things more efficient and getting the feeling of deserving something because they have worked for it. Yeah, gaming literacy is another topic to talk about, because when you will notice this when you've been placed in front of a game and you have never played a game, that you find trouble to even move around. And it's always hard to get out of your perspective, but that needs to be considered, different levels of literacy. And he designed lots of cool stuff. For example, when you learn a computer game, then you actually learn a new literacy, and you need to be aware to not overload yourself. The experiential learning cycle is quite cool. So first, you examine your environment. Second, you reflect on that situation. Third, you theorize and form a hypothesis. And the fourth, you take an action and experiment. And afterwards, you start again with one and see if there was any effect or how you can do better. And 3 conditions for active learning are experiencing the world in a new way, affiliation with the social group, and gaining resources for future learning and problem solving. These it's good to talk about, because game-based education, you have a context, you have a learner, you have a pedagogical method, you have a mode of representation. It's good to think about these things. So, next thing. What is really important for a game, the backbone of games, is challenges, rules, progression, and outcomes, basically. And you might think that if you get the outcome, then it's fun, but actually certain outcomes are quite boring, because then they are predictable, and uncertain outcomes are the thing that really produce intrinsic motivation, and that's what you want to get from a game. 6 main categories of mechanics from a game design perspective are also probably interesting. So you can think about space and different dimensions of space. One-dimensional would be Monopoly, 1 round. Chess, you can go 2 dimensions, 3 dimensions. It can also be zero-dimensional if it's just a mind game, basically. Second thing it's objects and attributes or states of objects in the game that can be manipulated. Actions are what the player can do. Rules are the defining space where these actions can happen. The skills are part of the players and really subjective. And the chance is the random element that sometimes enhances the uncertainty in games. And yeah, it's quite nice. 4 major categories of intrinsic rewards in life. This might be also useful outside of this talk. So Jane McGonigal, by the way, I love that so many women are in the research space in this, and you can just quote them. They're doing fantastic jobs. And she talks about 4 categories of major intrinsic rewards in life. One is satisfying work. The second is the experience or hope of being successful. The third being social connections. And the fourth is just meaning. So the chance to be something to be part of something larger than yourselves. And good games can help us achieve these rewards. I would like to shortly read her quote for her. Games, after all, are the quintessential autotelic activities. We only ever play because we want to. Games don't fuel our appetite for extrinsic rewards. They don't pay us, they don't advance our careers, and they don't help us accumulate for luxury goods. Instead, games enrich us with intrinsic rewards. They actively engage us in satisfying work that we have a chance to be successful at. Really important. They give us a highly structured way to spend time and build bonds with people we like. And if we play a game long enough, with a big enough network of players, we feel a part of something bigger than ourselves, part of an epic story, an important project, or a global community. Let that sink in. Also, assessment can be a difference. There can be a difference made if you talking about assessment for evaluation, like you have in school. You have failed the test or you have passed the test, basically, or assessment for your own learning. So getting the feedback and getting assessed by the game through constant feedback, but not getting the stamp of failure on your head, but just knowing, okay, these are my mistakes. That's how I can do better. And emotions, of course, you have this probably from memorization techniques, that emotions play a vital role in this. Failing. That's no one likes to talk about this, but in games we actually do like to talk about this, because failing is really not bad, because it's integral to the learning process when you play the game. When you go back to the Dark Souls thing, I think it's not possible to play Dark Souls on the first try without ever failing, because you need to fail to learn how to not fail. And you could say that this failing is a feeling of being inadequate, but the game always empowers you to overcome this feeling of inadequacy. So it supports you and offers some structures so that you can actually do this. And everyone has the opportunity to succeed in a game. And this is super crazy, I think, because in normal life, this is definitely not the case, that everyone has the possibility to succeed. But in games, they are designed to be accessible most of the times. Not Dark Souls. Well. And adaptivity is also really important. So when you that you're not overwhelmed, and when you play lots of times that you always fail, maybe the game makes it a bit easier so that you do not fail anymore. And on the other side, if everything is just a breeze for you and you're just way too fast, maybe the game makes it a bit harder for you. So you always have a good level of challenge. That's important, I think. And it actually, it says that there are significantly higher learning outcomes for games with adaptivity, because if you feel inadequate or you are being punished for learning, that's really harmful when you want to learn something, because there's nothing good with being shamed or Narration. Just to touch on that quickly. I try to make it short here. There is the hero's journey from Campbell, but that's huge. And Dan Harmon actually made a much more concise version of this, which is the story embryo, how he calls this. So you start with you, and the you is an avatar in the game, kind of game most of the times. So something that you have a relationship with, and that you can, that you feel represented in the game. So you need something. And you could say that the lower half is the unknown and the top half is the known. So the character needs something, leaves the zone of comforts. So he goes, or she goes, then searching for something, finding this thing, taking this thing, and often paying some kind of a heavy price. Thinking about Harry Potter or something. And then they return to the old lives and they have changed in some kind of way. And I find this really nifty. So you can apply this story circle to small scale stories, but also large scale stories. No worries. Yeah. And because I like creativity so much, there are different kinds of creative games. So maker games like Minecraft, the game is designed that you make something. Level development, like Little Big Planet, so you can create some content and share that with others, so that they can play your experience. Modding, like in Skyrim, or artifact creation. It's that you just create some little in-game artifacts like in Sims, or again game building, which you can do with Game Maker, which is sort of a gamified game building experience. Dr. Johanna Pirker, I want to mention her once. She made a really nice dissertation on immersive and engaging forms of virtual learning, and she focused on VR in this. But she has mentioned some different kinds of categories. For example, immersion, that you can have spatial immersion or tactical immersion, strategic immersion, or narrative immersion, and they all have their pros and cons. And if there are 4 things that you need for a motivational learning experience, it's flexibility and freedom of choice, individual feedback, allow for failure, and interactivity. Witten also extends this and says you need flexible interaction, support for a player community, or so that you can interact with a community of some sort. Transparent navigation, so you do not feel lost when you play the game and you do not know the way. User control, so that you have an agency, that you have an effect when you do something in the game. The robustness, so you can also try out some stuff and not break the code. And an appropriate visual design, and potentials of games are transformation of the failing experience in a safe space. I think that's one of the main benefits of games, that you have a positive failing experience. Also, creation as a learning method is still highly underrated, I think. And collaborative learning, where you are intrinsically motivated, it's active and engaging, contextualized. And I think these are all, just super important when you also want to learn languages, because, nothing's worse than not having the agency and control about the tempo. And last thing, that's the game that I am currently developing, or we're starting to developing this. I've been doing this for 14 months now, but so doing lots of research, and now we're doing some prototyping. And the game is called Edu Realm of Languages. And at this point, we want to support 14 languages. We focus on these first. And the concept is that you have, for each language, you have a different world where only this language is used. So, and it's a 3D game. So you learn a language similarly to traveling a foreign country and immersing yourself in that language while being constantly supported and guided, because games can constantly support you and guide you. And you have these nifty feedback systems. And all players are potential tandems for practice. You can, of course, choose to talk if you want or not to. And in a nutshell, it's a collaborative multiplayer. It's free to play. It's open source. It's built on the Godot engine and the Cardano blockchain. It's built for distributed creation and governance processes. So not us are developing the content, but the community is creating the content and also deciding on good content or bad content. So creation is really focused in our concept. And if you want to get in touch, just visit our website, educhainment.com. Drop us a mail at educhainment@protonmail.com or at pm.me. And our Twitter is educhainment as well. And we have this little trail, which, I mean, you can look at this yourself. I think probably don't need to do this now anymore. We're running out of time. Thanks for your attention. Let's get to some questions. Do you have any tips, resources for those who want to get more involved in using or developing games for language learning? I mean, the one resource that I found to be game-changing was this book from Professor Nicola Witten in 2014, Digital Games and Learning, because she's the first one, in my opinion, that is really making a broad overview of the interdisciplinary field and just references different theories and puts them all up there in my view, and you can just read through them in one book, and you do not need 20 books to get an overview. So I think I would go for that thing first. I mean, there are definitely cool things coming up in the last time, like the penguin that was presenting yesterday. But also, Duolingo is getting better. I mean, Minecraft is building a language learning part, I think, but more for formal settings, like in a classroom. And yeah, I think starting with this book is really cool. Okay. Have you found or looked at any research on the differences in approaching games between neurotypical and neurodiverse people? No, I haven't. And I'm trying to guess what you mean, but probably I think one of the other potentials of online games, or the game that we want to create, is also that anyone that has access to the internet or a computer can join the game in an pseudonym or anonymous fashion. So you do not need to put your identity on the presentation like you need at a school, and then someone in the back row does not like you and throws something at you. That can be quite harmful, I think. So I think for these cases, it's also really cool that or would be really important to have a more global palette of games where you can learn something. But having games for learning, I think it's a hard thing, because to my knowledge, no one really did this successfully yet, because I think they just probably always start from a bad point. So they want to be teachers and educators first and game is second. But if you want to make an engaging game, the first one that sniffs out attempts to fool you are the gamers, and they will say this is fun or this is not. So I hope this helps a bit. But accessibility, is important for games. Do you think that any of the language learning benefits you mentioned can still be gained from board games, traditional puzzles, or do you think it's something exclusive to digital gaming? I mean, for sure, you can just learn a language with a board game or like a puzzle or something that is. But I think that they need to be specifically designed to learn something, or maybe also if you have really easy games, then they are good for starting out. But I think the digital games just bring a whole range of things that are harder to achieve, at least in a board game. a board game context, because having an avatar, I mean, if you are playing tabletop games, like pen and paper games, then you also have sort of an avatar, but you're still sitting there with your own body and the other players seeing you. And so I think that it's really worth it to split this. And I think board games also have huge educational potential. For example, some couple of weeks back, I played Flügelschlag. It's in German. It's a wingspan or something. So a game about birds. So when you play the game, you learn about different bird categories and how many eggs they lay and what kind of bird they are and how they look. So I think, I mean, definitely there are cool games where you can learn something. Also on board games. When will the game be released and which languages will it support? That's a difficult question because I frankly do not know yet. So I guess hopefully we get to a playable version, or like an alpha version, and somewhat about a year from now, I would guess. And the languages that it will support, that's important to know that that we have focused on 14 languages now, which is English, French, Spanish, German, Arabic, Russian, Mandarin, Amharic, Oromo, Hindi, Portuguese, forgetting Indonesian, and forgetting other languages. But that brings me to another point. If you want to help us build this game, we really need people that are capable of speaking as many languages as you do. And if you are proficient in many of these languages, or just want to bring a language to the game, we can do that. We just need the community to build this up. So to build up all the starter content. And if you are interested in helping us out, drop us a mail at edutainment@protonmail.com, or visit our website and there you have a form to fill out. How can this be adapted for ages 2 to 5 for learning languages? That's a good question. Again, frankly speaking, I do not think it's possible. I think it's more, or at least the game that I'm doing right now, I think if you go for these really young children, they just have different needs and different capabilities than older children, teens, or adults. I don't know, probably have less text and more. Also depend. Okay, for learning languages, maybe. I mean, having text is probably a big hurdle. I don't know. It's not my proficiency. How is content in the game monitored when it is created openly by the community? So so anyone can contribute content, but then they get uploaded in a database, and then you have different actors that are checking this database, and then when it's and only after they check the database, they can get submitted. But also the community needs to vote on the outcome. So if a level is appropriate and good, then the community needs to vote on that before. And that's actually the reason, you might have heard it somewhere on the site, but we have a blockchain integration, an optional blockchain integration, because it's only for the governance layer. Because when you have community created content, you have to make sure that the content has some quality and is not just some random stuff that is not working. And so we need some kind of layer for people to decide on things together in a decentralized fashion, because we do not want to make this we do not want to be at the top and decide everything. Okay, I think we are over time. Thanks a lot for your interest, and probably we might see you around on the gathering here. And thanks so much. See you later.